For so many of us, it's the first thing we even think about in the morning. That smell, that first sip, it's a ritual. But behind that daily cup of coffee, there's this absolutely wild, centuries-long story. We're talking dancing goats, mystics, revolutions, and a whole lot of science. So let's get into it.
I mean, really think about it. How did a simple bean from the highlands of Africa become a global obsession? This is the story of how that happened, and trust me, it's a journey with some incredible twists and turns that, believe it or not, helped shape the world we live in today.
So where do we even begin? Well, our story starts not in some fancy cafe, but way back on a remote hillside in Africa, with a legend that's been passed down for over 1,000 years.
Okay, so the story goes that this goat herder, Kaldi, sees his goats going nuts, practically dancing after eating these red berries from a bush. So what does he do? He tries them himself, of course, and he feels that same jolt of energy. Now look, this is almost certainly a legend, but it's a perfect way to imagine that very first moment someone realized, whoa, there's something special about this plant. But long before we were all grinding beans for a morning brew, people in Ethiopia were using the coffee plant for everything. They'd brew the leaves like tea. They'd mix the berries with fat to make these little, well, think of them as ancient energy bars. They even boil the whole thing into a potent elixir. The bean was just one part of the whole shebang. So this amazing local discovery, it wasn't going to stay local for long. It soon made its way across the Red Sea into the Middle East. And this is where its destiny was completely transformed. In the 1400s, Sufi mystics over in Yemen started using coffee to stay awake during these really long nights of prayer. And from there, its popularity just exploded. I mean, it got so big that in 1511, a court in Mecca actually had a serious debate about whether it should be banned. They decided it was okay, and boom, coffee houses started popping up all across the Ottoman Empire. And Yemen, they controlled the entire trade from their famous port of Mocha. Yep, that Mocha. So from the Ottoman Empire, this new drink finds its way to Europe. And it didn't just wake people up. It kicked off a full-blown intellectual revolution.
By the mid-1600s, London was buzzing with coffee houses. And here's the key. They were a sober alternative to taverns. People called them penny universities because for the price of one cup of coffee, you could sit and listen to the greatest minds of the age argue and debate. Business deals were made, revolutions were plotted, and new scientific ideas were born right there. They were the heart of the Enlightenment.
And if you want to know just how obsessed people were, get this. The great French writer Voltaire supposedly drank up to 50 cups of coffee a day. 50. Even if the cups were tiny, that just shows you how essential coffee was to the intellectual firepower of that era. But here's where the story takes a sharp, dark turn. While Europe's coffee houses were buzzing with these new ideas of liberty and progress, a very different, much more brutal story was unfolding on the other side of the planet. And this is the paradox at the heart of coffee's history. On one side, you had this incredible intellectual exchange and social progress in Europe, but that entire boom was built on a foundation of brutal exploitation in the colonies. European empires set up these massive coffee plantations, clearing forests and displacing people, all powered by the forced labor of enslaved people. And the scale of this was just staggering. By the early 1900s, Brazil, fueled by the system of exploited and enslaved labor, had become a coffee superpower. Just look at this. A single country was producing a mind-blowing 80% of the entire world's coffee. All right, let's jump forward into the 20th century. This is when technology and culture came together to turn coffee from a social drink into the intensely personal daily ritual that we all know today. So first, you get the technology. The industrial espresso machine comes along in 1906, total game changer. Then you get industrial roasters, which means you can have mass production and the very first big coffee brands. And finally, the culture catches up. By the 1950s, the coffee break is an official part of the American workday. Coffee wasn't just for the coffee house anymore. It was for everybody, everywhere.
And that brings us to right now. Coffee is everywhere. It's a global phenomenon. But its complicated history and its reliance on a very fragile planet have created some enormous challenges for its future.
So, what are we up against? Well, first, that dark legacy of exploitation is still with us. So many coffee farmers around the world face terrible conditions and don't get paid enough to live. That's why you see all these ethical certifications trying to guarantee fair wages. And then there's the big one, climate change. It's threatening the very land where coffee can grow, shrinking that coffee belt around the equator. But
there is hope. Scientists are literally in a race against time, developing new, more resilient hybrid coffee plants. The goal is to create varieties that can handle the heat, the droughts, and the diseases that are coming with our changing climate, all to protect the drink that's become so vital to our daily lives.
Which leaves us with this final, really important question. The future of that cup in your hand, it really depends on this delicate balance between scientific breakthroughs on one side and the ethical choices we all make as consumers on the other. Will it be enough? The next chapter in coffee's incredible story, well, that's one we're all writing together right now.